Okay, welcome back. Today we're talking about providing nutrients to your plants and kind of the basics of what that entails. And yes, the focus is on cannabis, as it typically is, but all plants need nutrients, and you can use the information in this episode to have a happy, thriving plant regardless of what species it is. This information is aimed at the beginner grower to help lower the barrier of understanding the role of nutrients. It may be pretty obvious from this episode, but I was never someone who used a lot of nutrients during my growing, and I've cultivated quite a few plants. I try to provide most of my nutrients in the soil from the compost, manure, guano, ash, etc. But recently I've started to dive into utilizing nutrients, and it does make a huge difference, especially for indoor grows. But you can make the decision for yourself as to what type of nutrients, if any, that you use. And this could depend on if you're growing indoor, outdoor, greenhouse, organic, or just trying to keep a plant alive. Also, big exciting news. I'm moving into a new office/recording space, which is super exciting and everything, but I also almost just cut off my thumb, so it's a tough time to move. For everyone wondering how I almost cut off my thumb, I really wish this was a cool story, but I was literally just washing dishes and the handle of a ceramic mug broke off in my hand while I was cleaning it and sliced through my thumb. It was a very, very deep cut, and now I have 9 stitches on my thumb, but I'm doing great and can do almost everything that I did before. But wow, what a new perspective on cannabis use and accessibility. I found grinders are really, really hard to use, and rolling up is moderately difficult, but I've mostly been using my Puffco Proxy with the hot pen because it is by far the easiest way for me to consume at the moment, and I've also been enjoying some infused beverages, which I don't typically do. Anyway, I hope you find this episode with Tanya Funk as helpful as I did. And if you want to support this podcast, consider joining the Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Or if you want a free and easy way to support this podcast, drop a 5-star review wherever you listen. Relax your jaw, take a sip of water, roll up a J, and just chill with us for the next hour. Okay, welcome back to the Bioactive Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to learn about cannabis nutrients and what we need to feed these beautiful plants to make sure they're happy and healthy. And I have Tanya Funk on, who is an expert cannabis cultivator and a really great communicator. And I'm really excited to learn from you and for you to teach our community a little more, especially for new growers in cannabis. Not getting into like the crazy science, just for a new grower, teaching them what they need to learn about cannabis nutrients. So thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, no, I understand. And because I was not a cannabis grower when I got into this industry, I was more intrigued by it. So I had a lot to learn. You dive into an industry and there's definitely a lot of opinions in our industry, which is amazing. But, when you're coming in, you're new to it, you want to understand, how can I do this? How can I do it better? How can I be smarter about it? And you want to learn more. That's perfect. We've all been there.
Yeah, there's a lot of opinions, but there's so much passion, and I think that's why there's so many opinions on it. Is people are so passionate about this plant and quality medicine that we want to represent that well. Would you mind kind of describing your journey into the industry and in growing cannabis and what that's been like?
Sure. Well, it was unique because when I got into this industry, it's been almost 15 years. I dove in with a plasma light and I saw this energy efficient opportunity to have a really amazing grow light. And I think it was probably about 20 years too early for the technology itself. We're finally getting around to that. But it was such a great learning curve. And I was also unique that I was female in an industry. It was
Yeah.
predominantly a male industry. So here I was coming into this market, one, not really knowing what I was doing with cannabis growing. I had vegetable gardens. I enjoyed cannabis, but I wasn't an expert grower. And I started learning about how lighting can impact, a plant's, health and prosperity of it. I looked at it in a different light. And because of that is how I sort of found myself. I've been sort of in the picks and shovel side, but from lighting, I evolved into getting into the microbial component because The bacteria in the soil was responding differently to a less stressful lighting environment. Um, and
Mm.
so basically in 2017, I want to say 2018, Organitech was founded. My business partner, Christopher Leonard, came out of Lumitech Lighting. So we were both way back in the day lighting. And he has
Cool.
quite the legacy. And so we started with microbial inoculants, and then we got into minerals for the nutrient profile, which we'll talk about. But essentially, how can you feed a plant and do it smartly, do it most efficiently, do it with good quality? Because ultimately, just like with us, you are what you eat. So, what you put into that plant, you're ultimately going to consume. And so, there's
Oh, I
different
love that.
grades.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you are what you smoke. It's
you
the
are what
new
you smoke.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
love that. No, it's cool that you and your business partner both started in lighting because my like first time I tried growing, I definitely didn't have enough light and like even right from the start I could tell my plants weren't healthy. And it's cool to see how quickly the plants respond to different things that you're changing and how they clearly show when they're happy and they clearly show when they're not happy, which, I think we should get into that later on like signs to look when you're looking at your plants of when they might need more nutrients or whatever that is. But it's so cool hearing about the industrial side of this and being able to kind of learn step by step because I think that's how a lot of people kind of advance in this industry. And I just also want to just focus on the little home grower that's like, you know what? I want to pop a couple seeds and
Hmm.
what that process is. And when did you start growing cannabis? Just out of curiosity, like
2012, I would say 2011, 2012. When I
okay,
first got out, I had California. Of course, California is different. I came from Colorado. So I did it all. I did, the outdoor. We owned a farm over the years. We've had indoor hydroponics, etc. I've done a ton of consulting work. Um, I was a guest teacher, I guess you could say, at Oaksterdam, specifically in the lighting
cool.
world. So it was really getting to know the different processes because every environment's different. Every story is different. And there's not always, here, this is going to work for everybody because,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
and I have to ask every guest, why cannabis? Like what called you to this plant as a career and as like your whole life essentially is focusing on cannabis, What was it about the plant?
It's the love, it's the people, it's the community. And it is an organism. You can get as granular as you want and develop systems and SOPs, but you're still dealing with an organism and a creature, essentially. But really, it was the love, it was the people and the community. It's just an amazing industry that we're in. Um, and there's something inherent, obviously, within our bodies, our receptors, that we respond to this. And
Mhm.
it's also an industry that needs to grow. We need to
Yeah.
evolve. We need to take, the stories of the past and evolve with science into the future and figure out better ways to do it. And that impacts all of our agriculture, not just cannabis.
Ooh, love that. And I love that you brought up that it's a living plant and it has its own systems within that plant. And that's what makes it so diverse and complex and beautiful. And, obviously makes it difficult to study and for some people difficult to
Mm-hmm.
grow too. But as you give it more love and as you learn more about it and what it needs, like you can become a better grower and a better educator and cultivator. It's really beautiful when you think of complex biological systems interacting with each other and how that medicine is just expanded so much when we have these complex systems working with complex systems. And that's very unlike other systems of medicine. I won't bash pharmaceuticals, but, they're simple and they're not living. They're often synthesized. So it is beautiful about
Yes,
natural products.
it is. It
Yeah.
is. I appreciate that. So,
Yeah. So can we start to dive into nutrients? And first of
sure.
all, like, do all plants need nutrients or is cannabis special that it needs to be, supplemented in these specific ways to make it grow and thrive?
All plants need them. I mean, essentially, it has enough within the seed to germinate. But at that point, now we have biologically, naturally occurring organic nutrients. If you think about it, that's what organic gardening is. I mean, essentially, microbial digestion of decaying matter to translate that and make it bioavailable for the plant. In other words, the plant can eat that. Let's
Mm-hmm.
simplify those terms. So that is organic gardening at its heart. but we're dealing with racehorses essentially. We're trying to take a plant and we want it to do well, but we want it to do really, really well. Because the more that you can provide the balanced nutrition, the right environment, the more the plant can prosper, and therefore you have better expression. It's just like with us. If I want to sit on the couch and do nothing, I'll still live. But if I want to go out and I want to be, the best at what I'm doing, if I need to train, I got to feed my body right. I got to do the right things for my body and to make those goals, whether it's physical, whether it's spiritual, whether it's emotional. You have to put in to what you get out. So it doesn't matter if you're growing tomatoes or watermelons or anything, you're still going to have to give it some food. And so let's choose what is the best food you can put in.
Love that analogy of just kind of taking care of yourself and prospering versus just staying alive. Because I think a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
people could keep a cannabis plant alive, but maybe it wouldn't be
yes.
producing that nice quality smokable flower that you're after. And that's really where
Bingo.
that next level of, of cultivation comes in.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's,
so, oh, sorry, go
oh
ahead.
no, I was gonna say it's called a weed for a reason, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It will
Exactly.
grow.
Yeah, so say you're at home and you just germinated your seeds. It's kind of around that time for people to start germinating their seeds for outdoor grows. And now maybe they want to move up to solo cups where they fill that solo cup with some soil and then they're going to put that germinated seed in. Right off the bat, does that soil that you're putting that germinated seed in, is there certain nutrients that we need to have right then in that soil? Are we introducing nutrients
Well,
that
yes,
early?
you are. And sometimes soil comes that way. You can have amended soil and they'll have, different inputs. But essentially, from the entire life cycle of the plant, once it's germinated and it's popping, up until the very end, you're going to feed it. Now, you know, does that mean just go get a bottle that says, grow on it or, and then switch to bloom when it's bloom? No, that doesn't mean that. And a lot of people do that. They go, oh, it's the grow, it's the veg. That means during veg, I pour this in and now I'm at bloom. It doesn't really work that way. In the world of plant nutrients, we spend a lot of time in the feed charts. And so if you ever see a feed chart, it's because it's going to have a list of products that are designed to go together. And as the plant's life cycle progresses, then things change in what you want to feed it. Just like with a child, start with milk and soft foods or however that goes. And then you ramp up. So we're going to do
Totally.
the same thing with plants. And so the feed chart is really important to follow if you want the system. And don't just go in and be like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, or so and so told me that these are the secret sauce that I need to buy this product, this product, this product, which is a very common choice, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason why we have those feed charts, and there's a lot of science that goes into it, and a lot of, both theoretical science but applied science. And then we're learning more with different strains, and as more information comes out, if you're
Hmm.
growing different strains, you want different results. We pass that information through feed charts, through podcasts when people talk about it, and they have tips and tricks. But there is a lot of time that goes into those. So I highly recommend follow the follow the chart. It's there for a reason.
Follow the feed chart. Awesome. Great advice. In a in nutrients, what are the main compositions of the nutrients? Like what are we actually giving to our plants to allow them to grow? And is this usually in a specific ratio or as you mentioned, like is the ratio changing throughout that growth cycle so that the plant needs more of something during veg and maybe less of something, later?
Yes, you are correct. It does change. It does evolve. So you have your macronutrients, your NPK. You'll see it on the front of the bottle, right? Those are your big boys. Those are your most predominant, as far as what your plant needs. But then there's micronutrients. So you've got a little bit of both. And, so as your plant evolves, you're going to shift between different levels of micronutrients, different levels of your macronutrients. That's why it's so important to follow those feed charts and some of the, you'll have your primary grow ingredients that usually are, 3 to 4 parts, let's call it. And then you have your kind of supplemental components of any program that add those subtle micronutrients as you're evolving, because things like boron, things like molybdenum, say that 10 times fast, right? They sound,
Yeah, right. I'm like, shout
yeah,
out to you.
the iron levels, the copper levels, all these things really matter. And that's what goes into the science of a good nutrient program. So it's, we try to take the burden off of you and we try to say, here's your solution. Um, but you do change and you will see that those numbers fluctuate. But again, it's not that just like you get a bottle of grow and pour it on your plant during veg and bloom for flower. You want to really use everything as it's designed. And then that will ensure you get all of those nutrients. And at the end, you have kind of the best performing flower you could have.
This is a question from someone on Patreon, and they want to remain anonymous, but they wanted to ask, can you use Miracle Grow as a substitute or some other like type of commercially available product to
I
help your
mean,
plant
yes,
grow?
you can. Again, but I can eat McDonald's today too.
Okay.
I can. I can definitely eat McDonald's.
Yeah,
I can
okay.
consume it. Will it do harm? When it comes down to the biggest thing you have to worry about with nutrients, and I'll explain it this way. We are a mineral-based nutrient, which means we get everything out of the earth. Everything comes from the earth. We're not synthesizing anything. We're not going into a lab and making it up, right? Um,
When you
mhm.
say when you say we, you mean
Organitech, yes.
Organitech, right?
Yep,
As in like your
Organitech.
company.
Yeah,
Okay,
no, that
just
makes
making
perfect
sure.
sense. Good clarification. So there are different ways of approaching that, and what can happen with there's different sources, and things can get contaminated, and so you have to be careful because you can have things like heavy metals in your nutrients if they're not a really good quality, which means at the end of it, either if you're getting tests, your flower is going to test hot and you got to destroy it. If you don't test it, then that means you're ingesting it. So again, it goes back to quality in, quality out. And you can very easily buy a nutrient program that's cheaper, lesser quality, and you end up with problems like that.
Wow, I've never thought about that heavy metal contamination in your plants because even if you have maybe other medicinal plants that you smoke or utilize, like you definitely should be using super high quality nutrients so you're not just adding, I'm not saying poisoning yourself, but reducing the medicinal quality of that plant or that herb or whatever you're consuming. So, thank you for that. And I'm sure that person probably already kind of knew that answer, but maybe just
Yeah.
wanted to
Yeah.
reassure
Yes.
themselves. Um, Now, in general, I know the feed chart is so important, but in general, how often are people applying nutrients to their plants? Is it every time they water? Is it once a week? Is it every
Um,
few weeks?
that's that's a
Just for
great
timeline.
question. I like to do 2 to 3 times a week. There are some people who will do it every time they water and then they have to give it a break. But I'm a fan of, hey, every other time, give your plants, say you feed them 3 times a week, and your fourth watering day is just a fresh drink of water. Nothing wrong with that. I think that's a great way to pace it. You can also, you can be lazy about it. If you're not looking to say, hey, I need to produce weight, you're looking at your craft cannabis. You don't want them to go hungry, because if you go hungry, or the plant goes hungry, I should say, you're going to stress that plant out and it'll actually stop producing well. You want to keep feeding your plant. You don't have to dump more on it. You just want to keep up on that. Every once in a while, have like I said, a drink of water, so to speak, just water it without nutrients. Um, that's a nice practice. But the minute you let that plant go hungry, it's actually going to stop kind of pumping up. And that's where you start reducing your bulk and your weight at the end. So you don't want to stress it out, but you can get a little lazy with it. Because I know, when you're at your home, it's different than when you're at, the the ranch and you're needing to produce for weight. It's a different game. So
Yeah, it's funny. I know a lot of of cultivators, whether it's for cannabis or other medicinal plants who produce commercially, and their house plants always look so much worse than the plants that they're cultivating professionally. And they're just like, listen, I only have so much energy, and yeah, the house plants
Yeah,
really
I'm
take the
actually,
loss
mine
most
looks
of the
pretty good
time.
right now behind us, so I feel I'm like, okay, whew, thank goodness.
Does.
But no, I'm definitely guilty. So with that, the tip and trick I give on this, like for instance, amplifies our microbial inoculant. Honestly, I just make sure every once in a while I put a little amplify in my watering can for my houseplants. Does a lot of good. That's the trick.
I just started like providing nutrients to my houseplants, and it's amazing how quickly they just like started being productive and producing new leaves and looking fresh. And I'm like, oh yeah, I probably should have given you guys a little bit of attention in the past few months. But definitely, your houseplants matter too. I wanted to go back to what you said about Organotech being a mineral based nutrient, and just talking about the pros and cons of mineral based versus other types, and like what's available on the market for these different types of products that people might come across when they're looking to purchase
Yes, definitely.
nutrients.
Okay, um so you can do more the like I said, the lab synthesized where it's a liquid formula. We start everything with the powder component because it is mineral. So we have powder options, we have liquid options. Um, that allows people to not have to ship water, which is really nice. That's a big
Yeah.
one. But some people like to buy it in liquid form because it's just blended. But as far as the different brands and different choices, you end up with a lot of things on the shelf that are going to be more in the synthetic realm, the liquid form that comes in that spot. But there's quite a few companies that have shifted to this mineral. I can't speak to exactly who they were or what their choices are on it, but it is something where you just want to stick with something that's more reputable, that has that where it makes a difference. Now, the other option you have, you can also grow fully organically. But if you're growing indoors, that's a little bit difficult. But meaning that you're supplying plant
Mm.
food, you have a ton of microbials in there. You're doing bat guanos, you're doing kelps, you're doing fish, which you can imagine the aromatic properties of such a feeding program. Um,
In an indoor tent,
yeah, that's rough.
especially, that would get
It gets a little
rank.
rough.
Yeah.
So that's why we're kind of like this hybrid model where I'm like, yeah, we put the mineral, not everything's labeled as organic, for instance, but it is mineral based. And we love microbes. We feel that you need to have microbes. I know different companies have different
Hmm.
stances. They don't want microbials, they want everything to be clean. Oh, I have the philosophy, our company has the philosophy, you are going to have microbials no matter where you are. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So why not? I mean, we have rhizospheric, which is root zone microbials that we naturally cultivate, and we cultivate, put them into a ferment. So you can add those in and sort of create the best, healthiest root zone possible. Doesn't matter where you are, right? So it's like great digestion for your plant. That is like I'm all about
Yeah.
that. You get better quality, your terpenes are beautiful, like it's rich, it's just a wonderful approach to it, and you get the different flavor. Different strains have different ways of expressing themselves, and
Mm.
that's what we're doing in craft cannabis. We're not trying to do bulk that tastes the same everywhere. I want it to taste like the strain. I want to know the expression of the plant itself. So that's my take on microbials. So we're a hybridized company, microbes, minerals. We're not fully organic, but we're definitely not synthesized.
I love that because it goes back to it being a living organism. And just like us, we have microbes all over us, and they're absolutely necessary for our health and survival. And same thing with every other plant and organism. So, why would we try to take away that complexity? It obviously does offer something to the plant, and also encourages the plant to produce more of these compounds to, protect itself from these microbes and make sure that its own equivalent of an immune system is working, properly and
Well
protecting
put.
itself.
Yes, exactly. It's a probiotic for your plant. Might as well take a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So Is there any difference in the way we treat plants with nutrients if we're doing an indoor grow versus an outdoor grow versus a greenhouse versus hydroponics? I would assume hydroponics are a little different, but are they different at all based on their environment as far as how much we have to
I mean,
provide to
if
them?
you're working in a living soil, which means a really healthy soil, you'll hear that word. If the translation means incredibly healthy soil, you can reduce some of your nutrient input. It's which is nice. But in general, you still follow the same regimen, whether, even in hydroponics, there's slight differences, but you would still follow the feed chart essentially.
Okay, and that's the same thing for
Yep.
hemp as well. Hemp versus
hmm
type 1
Now, there's
cannabis.
new
Okay.
information, like we're starting to look at nitrogen ratios for THC percentage and et cetera, et cetera. But we're not really there. You can follow the same. Doesn't matter because I call it weed light, but I am a hemp fanatic. I love it because I'm a little bit older
Yeah.
now. I gotta, things are different, and so I love hemp. I think craft hemp is amazing. It's what I need in my body versus what I needed 10 years ago. And so the more that you can put care into that hemp, the better the production it will give you as well.
Yeah, this joint I was smoking when you logged on, this was a hemp joint. I'm actually going to take another
Nice.
puff of it because I've been really, actually, this has grown. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Allison Justice, but she's a really great hemp cultivator and
Nice,
scientist.
nice. Yeah, craft hemp is amazing. I mean, the beneficial properties of what hemp can provide and the functionality that we can have in the day. And it's just the more we're able to study it, and understand the different properties and the strains themselves. I mean, we've got one of our strains this year, it's called Fantasia. It's like one of the yeah, it's an
Ooh.
exclusive strain. So we're going to keep tracking her this year. She's a beauty. We're really excited to be playing with her. Um, and I just can't wait to see how she expresses herself and then what the benefits, and then looking at the cannabinoid profile once she's, harvested, of course. But looking at those variations, again, high end nutrients, that goes back to then you're creating a high end result no matter what.
Yeah, that's actually part of our study called the Science of Smokability, where we're cultivating cannabis, actually
Mhm.
hemp. We're cultivating hemp and then exposing it to different levels of nutrients and seeing how that affects the
Oh,
smokability of
yeah.
the flower. So we're doing it with hemp because it's more compliant and a lot easier. But we do expect to eventually, translate this to THC dominant cannabis, type 1 cannabis, to see if it's the same thing because we're trying to really emphasize the quality of the smoking experience, especially for medical patients, because it's still the preferred consumption method of most medical patients. And we need to make sure that they're getting quality product that feels good in their
100%.
body.
And these are the questions, for instance, go back to the micronutrient question. We, in our traditional ag, we have levels that traditional ag understands what is a boron toxicity, for example. We haven't hit that type of information in the cannabis world because, again, it hasn't had the opportunity for the study. But those are the components we're looking at to
Yeah.
say, okay, well, how much boron is enough versus too much, right? And going back, yes, we have a general idea, but we're still just getting into this place federally where we can study all of this, and thus hemp is really important on that. Um,
Yeah, and I feel like we're also just getting to the point in the industry where people are ready to collaborate on this type of science and get the information out there because for a long time it was kind of this gatekeeping practice where especially cultivators didn't want to drop all of
mhm.
their secrets because somebody else would just go and steal that and produce, the same quality near them and they that's kind of what drives the market is quality, especially in the craft world. So I think finally enough people are growing and sharing and learning that we're starting to want to do these studies and then finally disseminate them to all the growers and even home growers too. That's still translatable to home growers who want to grow quality
Yes, it is. We'll
cannabis.
definitely keep you posted on that. We're really curious. We call it the quantified grow, where we actually look at, tissue samples as we progress with a lot of our big growers, looking at different strains to kind of look at how they respond to the different nutrient profiles in a very granular perspective. So we should definitely stay in touch. A lot of crossover.
We will 100% stay in touch. And I guess I had another question about the growth chart for nutrients, and that's is are autoflowers and photo period, are those both represented
Hmm.
on the grow chart, or are you
Yeah.
using, okay, so they're both there. So no matter what type of flower you're growing,
Yep.
you can
You can
still
follow
follow
that.
that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And everyone has like little tweaks here and there. I mean, everyone is a chef. And there are certain adjustments. And once I think that's sort of as folks become more proficient in growing, they're going to see those subtleties. If there's purple banding, you've stressed it out type thing. Little things to work at. And you can always go back. There's a lot of good resources. I mean, organitech.com, there's amazing resources with different, here's some examples of nitrogen deficiency, molybdenum, here's calcium deficiency, phosphorus, etc. So there's great forums on Reddit. There's great resources now coming up because we used to all go to a grow store and ask these questions. And now things are
Yeah.
changing because we can have more open conversations, as you were saying. So we're trying to disseminate that information as much as possible so that people have the tools in their arsenal.
Awesome. Do you mind if when I post this YouTube, I show a couple of the clips from your website of these
Please
different
do. Please
deficiencies and what
do.
they look like?
Share the knowledge. It's the
Okay,
wealth.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to put that right on the video over us so that people can check that out because I'm definitely interested too in learning about that. So a little thing in our industry in the weed world and the stoner world is white ash versus black ash, and a lot of people think that white ash represents quality and black ash represents not quality cannabis, and a lot of people are also attributing that to the amount of nutrients that maybe haven't been flushed in that flower, and that's what kind of contributes to that
Hmm.
black ash. I'm not saying this is true or not. I don't think we have the science for that. But would you mind discussing the process of flushing nutrients from a plant
Yes, and
before
you're
harvest?
correct. That's a long legacy of conversation on that. Of so at the very end of harvest, I mean, you're prepping for, cutting down the flower, and what your goal is that you want to taste the flower. You don't want to taste anything. It doesn't matter if you're putting good stuff in, etc. But we're, you know, prepping for consumption, like just like anything that we're eating or consuming. And so we recommend going through the last like 10 days or so of not putting any nutrients. We still do the biology. We still have that because that helps with the digestion, the mobilization. But at the very end, you just want to get down to the pure flower. She's reaching the end of her life cycle. She's not consuming those nutrients. So you're going to have a lot of excess anyhow that you would be wasting. So it's a great time to do that so that you can enjoy the flavor of that profile. And you're right, and having the white ash and say, okay, this was flushed properly, and but there's a lot more to it. I mean, there's the curing and et cetera. But yeah, definitely, we recommend it. Flush your plants. It's a good idea. Yeah, she doesn't want to eat that much anyhow, right then. So it's time.
So is flushing like, so you're providing your plant with
Hmm.
water without nutrients? Is it
Hmm.
actually flushing? Like, do we have any, like, okay, it is. So we know that it's actually like
Yeah,
removing those
yeah.
nutrients from the plant. It's
Yeah,
not just
yeah,
like the last.
it
Okay.
is. And then you also see it in the soil as well. As the runoff continues and it's sort of drenching the soil, you're going to get that to literally flush out.
Okay, cool. So that also leads to my next question about soil types. And say I was somebody who wanted to, like, maybe I live somewhere that has dope soil and I want to just grow directly in that soil, but I don't know what the baseline of my soil is and what I need to supplement in there in order for my plant to grow properly. Am I still just following that grow chart and kind of ignoring what might already be there? Or should I maybe test what's going on in the soil first and then follow up with nutrients
So
if
it's always a
needed?
good idea to test, and you can get soil labs and get a baseline. Also test your water. If you really want to know what you're dealing with, those are your two good baselines. However, I know that not everybody does that. I mean, I don't always do that. It's and I have you
Yeah.
put stuff in the plant in the ground, and you're like, okay. In general, you still want to follow that feed chart, but there are things to start looking for at that point. Obviously, you don't want to have excess nitrogen and burning. And that's where saying, how do I have a reference of what I can see in the leaves? use that, go to organotech.com, look at that site, look at the pictures so you can actually see that, because that's what you'll be looking for. It's, the different coloration, discolorations, burnt tips, etc. You have to still watch it. It is still a living organism. And kind of back to my early point, yes, we can create a system. I mean, that's what we have for our consulting arm. We have a system, but there's still things that happen. And it doesn't matter if you are the beginner grower or you're an expert grower. Things happen. It's the natural course, which makes it kind of the puzzle. It's
Yeah.
fun. But the
Yeah.
more that,
Keeps
yes,
you on your
yes. But
toes.
the more that you can actually learn and have in your arsenal the educational part of it, the better you're going to fare.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice, especially like taking the time to learn from your plants and not just, continuing to do the same thing. It's kind of a metaphor in a
Yeah.
lot of things in
Yep.
life, I
That's a good one.
think. So the parts of the United States or the world that are really well known for growing great cannabis, do we know exactly why? Like whether that's Humboldt or whether it's I know like New York has some areas. Is it the macronutrients? Or is it just the microbial community in general or just a combination of all of this? I don't know if we have the answer for this or
My
just your
opinion, because I
opinion.
don't think I have the answer to that. But for instance, the science and the purpose behind Amplify, which is our microbial inoculant, is going to certain areas where they have very healthy root zones. Certain plants have healthier root zones than others,
Okay.
or I should say more diverse. Let's call it a more diverse consortia, a more diverse, it's like a fish tank of a lot of different fish that get along, right? And I want that. I don't
Yeah.
want to have a fish tank of a single species, and I put another one in and then they all eat it. I don't want that. I want a happy, yeah,
Dies
exactly. I
immediately.
want a
Yeah.
happy consortia of microbes.
Yeah.
So we actually really work on collecting those rhizospheric or root zone microbes from very specific areas where we know that we have healthy, incredible growth. So that's that's kind of behind that. And then we culture those. So my opinion, it goes back into the microbial components. It goes back into the environmental in these certain areas, which do impact the flower itself.
Just smoking the flower from those areas, you're like, man, there's something really special about this. I don't know what it is or what constitutes it, but it's almost like even like the
Mhm.
spirituality component, especially of people who take a lot of care into their grow. It's like it really does. It feels different. It feels really amazing, especially outdoor grow, which I really, really enjoy. But I see why people enjoy indoor as well. To each
I
their
really
own.
agree with that statement too. There's love that goes into those plants and a lot of care, and you can tell. And it doesn't matter where you are, but there is a lot of legacy love in that area, and it's a lifestyle. It's People live by it.
Yeah, I love that. Would you mind discussing some common just like misconceptions that you hear about in with cannabis and nutrients? Because whether it's from the like manufacturing side, working kind of on larger scale, or with the small grower of maybe parts they get confused on, parts people make a lot of mistakes on, or just like I don't know things you hear a lot from the
Sure.
community about this
Um,
specific topic.
I would say that I think I used it earlier, but going and saying, "Oh, it's a grow formula," that means it goes on at veg, and then it's a bloom formula, and that goes on the. It doesn't work that way. They all work together. So, whether it's in our success nutrients line, we have flowers, trees, micro, bud strength as our primary. A lot of times people go, flowers, okay, great, that's for the bloom. Nope, nope. They all go together. Sometimes the names are kind of arbitrary, that we have a general idea for them, but they all do work together. So you do need to look at the system as a whole, understand what's on those labels, read the labels so you can kind of go look at the back. Everything shows you their macro and micronutrient breakdown, and come to learn those. I think that's a good one. Um, and I would say that was probably the biggest one. The other is this tends to be an industry of a lot of hype, and it's just part of the culture. Nutrients do work. It doesn't matter really, whether it's Miracle Grow, or one of ours. I mean, but they are going to have differences. Like we're a craft nutrient company. We're sort of small batch. We're not that big. It's just different way we process than some of the bigger ones. But you'll hear a lot of hype, but you get into a good quality one. Like we're not a hype company at all. I was over that after, the circa 2010. Um, so, look into the science, look at the company that you're working with and try to understand what they're doing. That would be my second little bit.
Cool. I think I always encourage people to look into the company because there are so many good people in
Mhm.
cannabis. And it's like people who are doing the right thing definitely have a banger, like About Us page or Instagram page or something where they want to
Yeah.
show their craft. Like people want to show when they're doing quality work and people want to hide it when they're not doing quality work. So just a little bit of digging can get you pretty far and just figuring out just a
Yeah.
little bit about a company. So I love that you take pride, and I love that you're a small company. When you're formulating these products, or when people are formulating products at home, what is the role of the pH in the soil microbiology, or is this something that people need to alter at home? Do they need to have a pH meter, or do they need to have any other sort of specialty equipment in order to do this efficiently?
So I highly recommend getting a pH meter because pH is going to be your digestion, right? You can put in a lot of stuff, but if your plant is off in their pH, you're not going to digest as you should. So then you're just wasting money at that point, and you're going to have a dying plant. And you know, every again, you go back to the feed chart, you'll see where your ideal, your 6.0 pH is. It's just a really good litmus test of is everything going to be in point and the plant is going to digest. You always want to look at adjusting your pH to where that 6.0 mark, that's your goal. Um, and I would say that some programs balance more easily than others. We have a very well balanced program, so it hits that 6.0. But depending on your water or what's going on there, you might have, if you're starting with water that's not an RO water, which means it still has a baseline of minerals and pieces in there, components, you might be more challenged with your pH. And so it's a good idea to just see where you're starting, and it's an inexpensive tool that becomes a really good piece of your arsenal.
And do people use pH strips ever, or is it usually just like a pH meter that they're using?
pH meter is probably the best way to do it. It's good to do and keep it easy.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And this is another question from Patreon, but somebody was wondering if there was a link between the nutrient levels of your plants and whether that is within where it should be, and how many pests you have. They're specifically asking in a greenhouse setting, and if having sufficient nutrients can help keep away some pests.
So, in theory, pests can be looked at as a bit of a digestion system of Mother Nature, right? So, again, the healthier your plant, it's not going to be um, as susceptible, let's call it, to pests and pathogens. It's why we want to have a healthy microbial root zone, right? And so it's that protection. So, yes, going into if your plant is stressed and showing deficiencies, you are going to be basically calling out to Mother Nature, it's time to digest me. I'm not doing so well over here. So if you can keep a well balanced nutrient profile, healthy microbials, you're more protected. And I'm not going to say it's a preventative 100% because, things happen. People come by, it happens. But the healthier you are, the less likely you're going to deal with the bigger problems, whether it's pathogenic, and diseases or pests themselves.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
And for my own brain, I use things like bat guano and other things like ash, maybe from the wood
Mhm.
stove, and things like that in my plants. And I know that they do things, but I really don't know how much they do. I don't know this. I don't know if this is a question or just like a topic,
Mhm.
but is this something that you use in like supplementing your plants with this? Is this something you kind of calculate, or do you just kind of toss them on top and hope that it's supplementing in a positive way?
So those are great supplements. I mean, that's organic gardening at its heart, right? You're taking
Okay.
and think
Yeah.
about it. Bat guano, bats eat so much. Like they eat bugs, they eat fruit, they have everything. So the guano, they're as it processes through their body and then it sits here for, hundreds of years, that is rich in micro and macronutrients. So while you're adding the bat guano to your garden, you're depending on those microbials that are in your soil to digest that and then make it into a translatable, bioavailable nutrient for your plant. So you're basically taking like what we do, which is we go out and we target all those micro and macronutrients. You're like, hey, in this pile of guano, they're all there. I'm going to let the microbes do the work, right? But we just sort of bypass that step. We kind of get right to the heart of it. And we're like, here's the minerals. Well, you're letting the microbes extract those minerals from what you're putting on there in the guano or the fish or the kelp. Um, so I'm a big hybrid grower. I love organic gardening and living soil because that is the process of digestion for the soil, right? I also have to, have production. So that's why I supplement with my minerals and my mineral program. So it's like I kind of do both worlds. And so it's not magic. It's actually worked and it worked for, eons. That's how we grew things. And I think it's a great way of getting a really nice diverse profile. You're feeding the soil food web and you're keeping that going, which is great and beneficial for ongoing farming. And so good choice on that.
Cool, thanks. I we have a couple bat boxes at our house where we put like on the side of our pole barn, which for any of the listeners, if you want to put up a bat box, it's just somewhere for bats to have a place to live and build their, little home. But we typically put them in the sun because they do need a lot of natural heat. And if you are either purchasing one or building one, make sure it's like compatible with what a bat does, which if you're watching this on YouTube, my Vaseline will be the bat box, but bats will like fly and then they come right below it and then they crawl up. So you need to make sure that there's no like big lip here or something because they need to be able to crawl up into that. But what we did is like we have a garden right below the bat box. So they can just like their droppings will go directly in the garden. And then if we want to collect the guano, we have this little board that we put under it. And then we just collect all the poop on the board and then we bring that over to the plant. So we just like are obsessed with our bats. Jake and I will sit in our yard with lawn chairs when the bats come out to like feed at night. And we just like stare at them because they're just so magical.
They really are. We have a lot of bats around here, and I love it too. I have one bat box on the north, or actually the south side of the house. And it's the same thing. Every night I sit on the back porch and just wait for them to come out. And I'm like, hi, guys. It's good. Good to see
I
you.
really enjoy it.
They're
Yeah.
amazing.
And they're helping with your mosquitoes, which is amazing
They
because
eat,
nobody likes mosquitoes.
yeah, they eat like a ton of mosquitoes a night or something. The other one is
Yeah.
the magic is chickens. Chickens are nature's little velociraptor digesters. And so chicken poop is like black gold, let that
Mm.
now, I mix mine into the compost pile because I want it to age, I want that so it's not as harsh. Um, but man, those little suckers are amazing. And the soil, once you start turning that, you'll see if you have a chicken coop. And, that's why the moving chicken coop and they eat all the bugs and then they digest them right there on site. It's magic. I love it.
So cool. And they eat ticks too, which we
Oh,
also love
yeah.
for, Lyme disease prevention, at least here in New England.
Mhm.
It's a very serious topic. But yeah, we used a lot of horse manure, which
Mhm.
whenever I tell people that, they're like, and then I'm like, but it's aged.
Mhm.
It's aged horse manure. Like we actually get it from a horse farmer where it's been sitting there for like 5 years. So it
Yeah.
essentially just looks like regular soil. And then we mix that in with our other soil and compost. And it's like our plants are so healthy because of that aged manure. It really is amazing
That
addition.
is amazing. And then you want to mix in a little mycorrhiza. Think about that as like the highways for the bacteria and, get that in there so you have a really good, this is building the living soil. Like this is what you want with a goal. And that's why I'm really very sensitive about what I put in. If I'm going to put nutrients into our soil, I want to put in really high quality because I spend all that time with my chickens and I don't have a horse yet, but one of those days, I can't wait. I can't wait.
Bucket list.
It's
You're
a
gonna get
bucket
a
list.
horse
Actually, I
someday.
want a mini horse. I want a mini donkey. That's what I
Oh,
want.
they melt my heart every time I see them.
Yes.
I'm just like fluttering. And so
Hmm.
I want a goat someday. That's my goals.
That's
Having a goat
that's a
or
good
maybe
goal.
four.
There you go. Goat
Yeah,
yoga.
they like to be social.
They do.
Um, I would also love while you're here and we have 10-ish more
Yeah.
minutes. Can you also just help people understand lighting a little bit better. I didn't know you had, such a background in lighting, but this can also be a little confusing for people when they're just getting going. Is there some sort of metric we should be looking for when we're purchasing grow lights? And are there any that you just recommend based on your personal experience that might be like, new user friendly and not too crazy complex?
Well, it's obviously a lot different than it was 15 years ago. I'm dating
Yeah.
myself. But, nowadays the LEDs have come a long way, and they do a really good job. I want to say PhotoBios is the line that we were carrying or that we're running. And I know Gavita has a good one that's out, but the LEDs now are so efficient. They do have a really good spectrum, which was the difficult part 15 years ago. And so having a good spectrum, obviously, a lot of people still deal with HPS, metal halide, because it's just tried and true. It does work, but the LEDs work in a much more elegant manner. And, now you don't have to just turn up the volume. You can do it, you can listen at a good level that's very healthy for the plant because the spectrum has been adjusted in the LEDs to be able to be specific for plants. So they've done an amazing job with it. And I thumbs up on the LEDs. When you are dealing with lighting, you do have to realize that LED is different than, for instance, high pressure sodium for your environmental components. So the
Mm,
temperatures, your climate control, all of that, it gets a little bit more complex when you are indoors. So you just have to make certain adjustments. If you are changing lights, you're going from something like an HBS to an LED, you're going to see that. And
okay.
if your temperatures, for instance, drop because it's not running as hot, your metabolism of your plant is going to change. So if you start having problems after shifting, you just need to look at your environmental. That would be my biggest tip on that one.
That's a great tip. I actually haven't thought about switching lights and what that does to your plant, but that makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
So yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of great information in this episode for a new grower because I genuinely think when people look at the nutrients specifically, I mean lighting too, but when people look at the nutrient part, they're like, that's too sciencey. I don't want to deal with pH. I don't want to deal with, nitrogen, phosphorus, all of these different, nutrients that the plant needs. It seems really complex, but as you've been talking about, it's really outlined really well on these packages and these different companies, websites and infographics. And if you just take the time to try to understand it for just a few minutes, I think it would do you a lot of help. And like, obviously this episode will be helpful too, but the resources are out there to
Hmm.
make it a lot simpler than people think that it currently is.
Well said. And don't hesitate to reach out. I mean, I know it's hard because, we had the big conglomerate of a lot of companies were acquired, and it's a different environment. But there's still companies like us out there. There's a few of us still that are craft that are there to have the conversations that, don't be afraid to send an email, hop up on chat, give us a phone call, and ask that question. It's nice to see people inquiring. And there's different tools. I mean, like one of our websites, 3alight.com, there's a whole book and there's tutorials on how to do this and different techniques for undercutting. And
Cool.
there's a lot of resources. So don't be afraid to ask. That is what we're here for. And, and have fun with it. It should bring you joy in your day.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, definitely have fun with it. Like, take time to enjoy the learning process too, because it is cool to see a plant that wasn't doing that well, come back and start doing really well and show what you learning and like changing something really small can do for the quality of that flower and how that final product turns out.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly. And then mix in some of the organic processes like you're doing. Be friends with the bats, you know, um, take on a few chickens, get a
Yeah,
bat
get a
box, take
bat
on a few
box.
chickens. It's worthwhile and it really does matter. And what you're going to find is that you will start seeing if you follow good programs, you put the right food in there, you're going to start to see the expression of the different strains come out where you're going to have a favorite. You're going to go, wow, that was amazing. And you'll watch, that particular strain really flourish. and find those results. And when you can correlate that and you can start growing the best you can, and then when you start doing the feeding programs and you can start producing 3 to 5 pounds a light, you know, that's the level where we're at from a professional standpoint. A grower doesn't have to do that, but you can still do really, really well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I was just thinking of something. If you've ever experimented, because you're talking about these organic approaches, if you've ever experimented with like co-planting nitrogen fixing plants like legumes or, these different types of beans next to cannabis plants, and if you've seen any like noticeable difference, if you've tried that. I don't know if you've tried that before.
I haven't personally tried it other than I am very aware of it. And yes, you can absolutely do that. And I think it's a great crop rotation, especially in the seasons, et cetera. It's very good because that goes back into, again, soil health
Yeah.
and communication in the roots because they talk to each other. Wasn't there just a study that was released that there's like a recordable snapping sound that can be heard? Did you see that? It was
Yeah, I did. I love these types of studies. There's been a few kind of similar, like in different types of plants, and I just really, really enjoy reading them.
it's incredible. And you can tell, and people, have always known it, but now that we're getting the scientific kind of evidence, so to speak, um, you know, we don't have to speculate. We can know.
Yeah, and just like, providing your plants or maybe your unborn
Yep.
child with like music and talking to them. And it's like, yeah, of course that makes them stronger and better. You're literally showing them love. And, of course it comes back to like what's being released from your mouth as far as gases and how that plays a part. But I think it's more than that. I think it's more than just what, gases we're giving off. I think it's a lot of the component of our intention and love towards that plant and how well it grows. And even if that's not true scientifically, it's true in my brain, and
I like that.
that's enough for
That
me.
works.
Yeah. One of the last questions is we talked about cannabis being these really complex biological system, and same with us, we're really complex. Have you found any strain or cultivar that like really meshes well with your body, where it almost feels like this perfect personalized beautiful medicine? I know some people have had that moment before. I'm curious if you have.
I have, and the sad part is, I know it wasn't ACDC. It was a strain I tried growing. This was years ago. I can't remember the name of it. And I could never find it after. It was one of those amazing moments where that was my first, like, my path started to shift towards more of that CBD dominant. That was my first awakening moment of, because,
Yeah.
you know, it's just different. I was maturing, in a different level. And it was an amazing moment where I was like, ah. So it started that quest down. Hey, okay, now looking at the hemp and the CBD dominant, it became more intriguing on that. But it was definitely eye opening for me, just to try something that was. It was just it clicked. It clicked perfectly.
Yeah, I'm glad you're speaking about also this relationship between us as humans as we age and our endocannabinoid system changes and matures, that the products we react to also change. A lot of people become very sensitive to THC. Even when they hit around 30, you hear a lot of people saying like, listen, I used to chief every day. I used to be like the biggest stoner. And then one day it just hit me where I was like, I can't smoke this weed anymore. Like I have anxiety attacks. It doesn't mesh well with my body. And cheers to everyone listening to their body and saying, oh, like I should pursue finding something else. And so many people don't know that there's quality smokable hemp on the market, whether that's CBD dominant, CBG dominant, THCV dominant. Like you have all these options of flower now, and you can mix them together and make salads, or you can smoke one that's, just straight up CBD, whatever you prefer. But like, as a consumer, especially a flower consumer, we have the ability to choose what types of flower and chemical profiles we want to put into our body and which ones might be most medicinal for us. And that might not be the same for someone else, but that journey towards finding products and being open to changing products as you age, I think is really, really beautiful. And looking at it in a positive light of, yay, I found CBD, not, oh no, I can't use a lot of THC anymore. Like that's a good perspective.
Yes, yes, and it is. You're right. It's like being able to acknowledge that things are changing, as we mature and age, and being okay with that. I'm in a different chapter now and I love it. It's great. But I also know that I prefer to take a craft hemp as my product, and that makes me so happy to be able to have that. So, um, it works well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing your life and your expertise. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If you have any social media that you want to shout out or just any topics you want to talk about at the end of this episode, the floor is absolutely yours. And I will be tagging Organotech in anything I put on social media. And I'll also make sure to put that in the show notes of the episode. So if anybody wants to purchase your nutrients, that they can, and knowing that they can also call you up on the phone if they have any questions about your nutrients, and get more information that way.
Definitely. So Organotech, their Success Nutrients is another line of nutrients that we do, which is, again, it's just a different option. And then also the 3Alite site,
Cool.
3alite.com, is a great resource. I would say there's a good system in place
Cool.
there. And that's one we work with a lot on the commercial side of things, where we're going into the larger facilities. We really dial them in and we get them into, full production mode. That's our pathway there. So yeah, keep in touch. We like to hear from everybody too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely be in touch, especially about
Hmm.
the science of smokability experiment. I think it'll be really, really cool. And phase one is going on right now, and we're working on phase
Awesome.
two next. So it'll be an ongoing project probably for the next couple of years. But yeah, thank you again. And mad love to all the listeners. Thanks for being here for another week. Appreciate each and every one of you.
Thanks for having me. This is wonderful.